Is this on? Testing, testing. Okay. All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the McGowan Theater at the National Archives and Records Administration. My name is Alina Simo. I am the Director of the Office of Government Information Services here at NARA, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to our exciting new term of the FOIA Advisory Committee, 2024 to 2026. I have the absolute pleasure of introducing our 11th Archivist of the United States, Dr. Colleen Chogan. She was sworn in on May 17th, 2023, as the first woman appointed to lead the National Archives and Records Administration. As the nation's records keeper, Dr. Chogan is responsible for preserving, protecting, and sharing the history of the United States. And she has appointed this committee here today that you see on stage, and we are all thrilled to be here and thrilled to welcome Dr. Chogan. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Alina, and good morning to everybody who's here, and everybody who's also online. As Alina said, my name is Colleen Chogan. I'm the Archivist of the United States, and I want to welcome you to the inaugural meeting of the 6th term of the Freedom of Information Act Advisory Committee. It's great to see all of you here at the National Archives. It's been over 4 years since the committee has been able to meet in person, and this was something that we talked about, and I really encouraged that we wanted to make happen to bring everybody here in person for a meeting. I hope if you have a chance today and you're here for the meeting that you're able to go into the National Archives Rotunda and to see the Declaration of Independence and all of our founding documents in person. It's a really transformative experience if you haven't done that before. Now, one of the grievances in the Declaration was that King George had called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of public records for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. So the depository of public records, that's what we are here at the National Archives. That's what we promise to do, to preserve, protect, and share our nation's records, and to not make them distant, the records of government. Exactly one of those complaints, those grievances that were leveled against the king. Our founders understood that in order to hold government accountable, you need transparency and you need access to those records. And certainly in about 250 years, that truth has not changed. 50 years ago, during the congressional debates over the 1974 amendments to FOIA, Senator Robert Taft Jr. said that freedom of information is the hallmark of a democratic society. It certainly is. It allows the American people to hold their government accountable. It ensures that our branches of government are honest and transparent. It allows an informed citizenry to wisely make decisions. And that's why the Freedom of Information Act is so important and why your job here is so crucial. The work of this committee is not easy. There have been a lot of recommendations made in previous terms and a lot of intense discussions. But that's a good thing. That's exactly what you need to do. And that's what transparency really requires. Intelligent, thoughtful, deliberate discussion and analysis, weighing the needs of governance and the needs of the public. And I know these issues are not just issues that can be analyzed, that need to be analyzed by this committee, although that's where we're looking to you for that leadership to be able to lead that discussion. It also involves FOIA programs run across the federal government with over more than 1 million requests, FOIA requests last year alone. So I encourage you in your work, I encourage you to get creative, I encourage you to be diligent in your approach. You were all selected because of your intimate knowledge of the FOIA system and your capacity to help make, not just here at the National Archives, but once again, government-wide. So I thank you for being here today, and I thank you for your service. I would like to turn the remarks back over to Alina, who are going to kick us off with the beginning of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chogan. Good morning again, everyone. As the Director of the Office of Government Information Services, and this committee's chairperson. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you to the William G. McGowan Theater and the National Archives and Records Administration for our first meeting of the 6th term of the FOIA Advisory Committee. It's hard to believe. I am just thrilled to be back in person here in the National Archives flagship building in downtown Washington, D.C. for our inaugural meeting of the 24 to 26 committee term. Earlier this year, Dr. Shogan renewed the committee's charter for 2 more years through 2026, and we thank her very much for her support. And may I please ask, next slide please, to advance? So that was a picture of Dr. Shogan, and that's a picture of me. And if we could go to the next slide. Okay, so before we get started with substantive part of our meeting today, I want to go through some basic housekeeping rules, review our agenda for today, and set some expectations for today's meeting. For those of you who don't know OGIS, we are the Federal FOIA Ombuds Office. This past weekend actually marked our 15th anniversary of our opening. And since then, we have championed a vision of a FOIA process that works for all. This year also marks the 10th anniversary since the National Archives established this advisory committee. Happy anniversary to both OGIS and to this committee. As OGIS director, I chair this committee, and OGIS staff provides amazing administrative and managerial support for the committee. We could not have done it without them. And I want to take a minute to acknowledge not only the hard work of the OGIS staff that went into planning and executing today's meeting, but I also want to extend my thanks to other OGIS staff that has helped us with this, other NARA staff, and to our terrific AV staff for all of their support in ensuring a successful meeting today. It really does take a village. So, a few housekeeping rules. This meeting is being recorded and streamed on the National Archives YouTube channel, but we always remind people it's with a slight delay. Also, please keep in mind that there's a slight delay between the time members on the telephone, we have 2 members on the telephone today we'll introduce, when they speak and when the microphones in the room are turned back on. This ensures that the live stream captures all audio. If you have not already done so, please take a moment now to turn off or silence all of your electronic devices. Meeting materials are posted on the FOIA Advisory Committee page of the OGIS website. Committee members, please make sure you identify yourself by name and affiliation each time you speak during the meeting. I myself am guilty of this, so I will try to remind everyone as often as possible, but it helps us tremendously with both the transcript and the minutes, both of which are required by the FOIA not FOIA, Federal Advisory Committee Act. Another F. The plan today is to take a 15-minute break at approximately 11:20 a.m. It may happen earlier or later depending on our pacing. Unfortunately, you cannot bring food or drinks into the auditorium, but you are welcome to go to the cafe located on this level to purchase food or drink, and restrooms are directly outside of the theater. We will reserve the last 15 minutes of this meeting for public comments, which, in accordance with the Federal Register notice, will be limited to 3 minutes per individual. Only those who are here today in McGowan will be able to comment, but please note that the committee meets again this Friday in a virtual setting, and there will be another chance to provide oral comments if you register via WebEx, via Eventbrite rather, to participate via our WebEx platform. Of course, written public comments are always welcome. Please visit archives.gov/OGIS/public-comments to provide comments at any time. So now on to our agenda. First, we're going to introduce all of our committee members. That's housekeeping number 1 and the most important part. Then we will hear from Kirsten Mitchell, who is sitting to my left. She will briefly introduce the FOIA Advisory Committee responsibilities, bylaws, and procedures. There will be a quiz at the end, so committee members, make sure you take notes. After a break, we will hear from 3 returning committee members, Jason R. Barron, David Collier, and Bobby Talibian, who will offer new members some tips about getting the most out of your time on the committee. David and Bobby and Jason will then turn to a passing the baton, if you will, of ideas from the last committee to this committee. And we're trying something new this term. The previous 5 terms of the committee started each term with a brainstorming session that led to topics ripe for study. This term, after 5 terms under our belts, I would like to suggest 3 broad areas of study, 3 big baskets, if you will, in which FOIA's biggest challenges can fit for further study during this term. Volume and frequency of requests, FOIA statutory reform, and implementation of past committee recommendations. There are 67 of them. So, any questions so far? Going to look around, make sure no one has any questions. Okay. I'm going to move forward with introductions. Next slide, please. And we're going in alphabetical order, and hence everyone is seated in alphabetical order. We're going to start with Jason Barron, who I believe is on the telephone. Good morning, Jason.
Good morning, Alina. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Great. I'm so sorry
Jason,
that I'm
if you could
unable
please,
to be with everyone
introduce yourself
in
by stating
person.
your name, the organization or agency you represent, how your work relates to the Freedom of Information Act, and if you could also share what you hope the committee can accomplish this term. Sorry, I talked over you. Back to you.
Thanks, Alina. So I am a professor of the practice in the College of Information at the University of Maryland in College Park. Previously, I spent 33 years as an attorney in the federal government, including at the Department of Justice, in the Federal Programs Branch of Civil Division. And then after that, I was the first director of litigation at the National Archives and Records Administration. Had the privilege of this being the 3rd term I've served on the committee. I was on the 2018 to 2020 term and the 2022 to 2024 term. And I will reserve other remarks for the time that you've given me later today.
Okay. Jason, thank you. So next is Kevin Bell. Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, my name is Kevin Bell. I am an attorney in the Office of General Counsel at the U.S. Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. In that capacity, I wear a handful of hats, but among those is handling both initial review and intake of FOIA requests, interfacing with requesters themselves, litigation defense, review of records, writing foreseeable harm statements, fawn indexes, essentially cradle to grave of the process. So I'm very excited to bring that perspective to the committee, and as a student of the committee's many recommendations, excited to hear all the different ways that we'll find to implement them.
Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate that. Neva.
Yes, hi, good morning. Good morning, Alina and fellow committee members. I'm very excited to be here. Part of this is my first time on the committee. My name is Neva Brock. I am with the Department of Defense and Defense Intelligence Agency. I am a senior counsel to an IC agency, and in this role, I am developing an information management and compliance office with other senior executives that incorporates all facets of information records management. My hope for this committee to accomplish this term is to see just how close the United States FOIA can partner with our Five Eyes and align our systems. Secondly, I would also like to see how we can address technological advances in FOIA requests. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dave Coulier. I'm director of the Breckner Freedom of Information Project at the University of Florida, which has been around about 47 years doing research and education and access to government information. And glad to be here. I'm excited. I think there are a lot of important issues to tackle. I forget, Alina, what you call them. What kind of requests? Not vexatious, not pugnacious, not
Frequent and voluminous.
Frequent and voluminous, unduly burdensome, whatever we want to call them. I think that's an important issue that has to be addressed all across the country, not just federally. And also interested in following up on OGIS 2.0. So maybe we'll call it OGIS 3.0 this term, and work on innovative ways of really making the system work better for everyone, requesters and agencies. So thank you.
Good morning. My name is Whitney Fraser Jenkins. I serve as the Disclosure Officer at the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, where I lead the division that processes all of the Freedom of Information Act and Privacy Act requests submitted to the agency. I'm excited to join the committee, and I look forward to building on the recommendations that have been recommended in the past, especially regarding FOIA resources and using technology to make the FOIA process more efficient. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Liz Hempowitz. I am here as Deputy Executive Director of American Oversight, which is a nonpartisan, non-governmental watchdog organization that advances truth, accountability, and democracy by enforcing the public. I share all that because I am here. We use FOIA every day. I am here as a personal and professional lover of FOIA and hope to use my time on the committee really making the best use of non-governmental and governmental voices and minds coming together to improve FOIA so that it meets its promise now and in 10, 20, 25, 30, 40, 50 years in the future.
Thanks, Liz.
Good morning. My name is Scott Hodis. I am currently an associate counsel with United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, where at DHS, which is, we are a component of DHS, and I defend and address and advise clients on FOIA matters. Previously, I had 16 years in private practice representing FOIA requesters, and then over a decade at DOJ, at the FBI and OIP, dealing with FOIA matters. For this term, one concern I have is that over the lifespan of the FOIA, the responsibility of implementing the act has narrowed more and more to agency FOIA offices themselves. As the number of requests skyrocket for a number of reasons, FOIA offices struggle to keep pace. FOIA offices are a modern-day Sisyphus struggling to push that rock up the hill alone. I would like to see this committee examine this specifically by addressing ways that agency personnel outside of FOIA offices share the responsibility with agency FOIA officers and offices.
Thank you. So, isn't Shelley supposed to be next? I think we kind of sat a little bit out of order, so sorry, Frank. I'm going to turn the floor over to Shelley.
Thank you. Good morning. It's an honor to serve with all of you. My name is Shelley Kimball. I am the Associate Director of the Communication Graduate Program at Johns Hopkins University here in Washington, D.C. I have more than 20 years of research experience in open government, and my focus has always been on taking a qualitative law and action perspective to understand that interface between requester and access professional. My personal interests and hopes to accomplish here on this committee are to look at ways to make that interface accessible, approachable, efficient, balanced for both sides, especially those that might be framed as unduly burdensome or excessively frustrating. And I also am really interested in finding sort of efficient, creative ways to bring to life the recommendations, not only ours, but of our colleagues in previous committees.
So, sorry about that. At the break, we're going to switch, and everyone's going to sit in truly alphabetical order. I'm just kidding. So, Margaret, go ahead, please.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Margaret Kwoka. I'm on the faculty at Ohio State at the law school. And I served on this committee once before in the 2016 to 2018 term. Great, Alina thinks I'm right. So I'm going to go with that. And I'm really happy to be back. I have spent about 15 years of an academic career studying FOIA primarily, and the kind of right to public access of government information more generally. And I've always taken an approach of really wanting to understand how the public uses access to information laws, and also how sort of administrative systems can better administer transparency laws. And so one of the things that I would be excited to think about in this term is that Congress actually has an appetite for revisiting FOIA and improving the law on a sort of, I don't know, vaguely decade cycle. So every 10 years or so, we get a set of FOIA amendments. I think there's a lot of recommendations that have come out of this committee in the past terms, and ones that we may think of as well as others that might be, cropping up around other parts of government and civil society that we could kind of mine for ideas about what kinds of legislative improvements which recommendations might be ripe for legislative improvements as opposed to other kinds of change. So I'm excited to work with all of you.
Next slide, please. I've been told by Kirsten. And Frank, back over to you. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Frank Lamonti. I'm newsroom legal counsel with CNN, where I advise our journalists on all aspects of the law, but my area of specialty and focus and passion is on FOIA, helping them to craft more effective FOIA requests, and then helping them with appeals, and to oversee the work of our outside legal counsel on the instances where cases go to court. I should say, I am not speaking on behalf of my employer here. I am here on my own nickel, and please don't attribute anything to the organization. I've been a super user of FOIA in a lot of different lifetimes that I've had, including as an investigative reporter myself, as an academic researcher, and now as a lawyer for a news organization. If I got to rub the Aladdin magic lantern and I just got one wish from the genie, it would be in these 2 years, I'd love to use the statutory reform task force or subcommittee to engage in a deep conversation about the continued necessity for a deliberative process exemption to exist under Exemption 5. If you look around at the states, at least half of the states function just fine without a deliberative process exemption to their FOIA laws. I think if you asked 100 people on the streets, why do we have a FOIA statute, 99 of them would say something like, so that we could see the process by which the government makes decisions, and to carve that out as an explicit exemption to FOIA arguably makes the law more whole than donut. And so I hope that we can use this committee as a vehicle to, and Margaret, your mouth to God's ears, if Congress is receptive to having that conversation, I'd love to be part of it. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Marianne.
Hello. Is this working? Okay. Hello. This is Marianne Manheim, and what am I? I'm at, where do I work? I'm at National Institutes of Health, and I'm specifically in the Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. And my office, I'm a branch chief, and our office handles Freedom of Information Act requests for about now 22 institute centers and offices around NIH. There are a few more that we don't handle, thankfully. Not that I don't love them. It's just a lot of work. What do I do? FOIA, we also do records, we do privacy. And I've worked in multiple agencies. I've enjoyed actually working in an area where I see the different types of requests and how they interact with records and privacy as well, so that's been part of it. Over the years, where I would like to see, where I think, having worked at multiple agencies where we've seen a lot of litigation, I'd like to look at how litigation has really sort of wagged the dog over the last few years. I think it's been a huge problem for regular requesters. I work at NIH, so I also see a lot of angry people making threatening phone calls. I'd like some decency in the world where everyone is actually getting together and working together. So I would like some of basic, just kindness to come back into all of this. And technology. Honestly, I think there's a lot of people on the outside and on the inside who don't understand how to use it, never mind just getting the technology. So I think that there's a need for training. Think there's a need for better technology so we can handle requests, which my other pet peeve would be that I see a lot of requests where they're describing words they want versus actual records. So I'd like to bring that back into FOIA when we used paper and we had to look for actual records. Okay, that's it.
Great, thank you. Deborah.
Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be here. I'm Deborah Moore. I'm the Chief FOIA Officer at the Department of Education. I'm also the first person to serve in that role since it became a full-time standalone position in 2021. So that's exciting because it gives me a lot of opportunity to figure out what needs to happen and how we can make things better. Before joining education, I spent about 15 years at the Department of Homeland Security in a variety of different roles, including overseeing the FOIA program at the Transportation Security Administration and also the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. For me in the coming term, I'm really interested in, as a lot of people have mentioned, working and building on the work that's been done in the past, especially the prior term's subcommittee on implementation, looking at what they've done, what they came up with, and perhaps considering a barrier analysis and looking at what are the impediments to implementation that agencies and other organizations are facing, like OJIS and OIP, to the recommendations they've received, and perhaps figuring out prioritizing solutions and ways forward, because there's been so much great work done, and recommendations are only as good as their implementation. Thanks.
So before we get to Ryan, is this on? Yeah. I just want to introduce Joan Mombleau from the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA. She's unable to be with us today. She will be here Friday. She is both an attorney and an IT expert, currently works as a Government Information Specialist, GIS, in the National FOIA Office at EPA. She previously worked at NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration at the Department of Commerce, using her IT expertise to help administer FOIA and manage records. Prior to joining federal service, she served as senior knowledge manager at several national law firms. We do expect Joan at Friday's meeting, and hopefully then she'll be able to share what her goals are for this term of the committee. But I did not want to leave her out. So, Ryan, over to you.
Thank you, Alina. My name is Ryan Mulvey. I'm an attorney at Americans for Prosperity Foundation. My practice there touches on various issues of administrative law and legal investigations. In that job, I help lead some coalition efforts with other organizations on FOIA, particularly Hill Outreach, policy education on FOIA and the need for reform and the types of reforms we can see. I help manage a center-right coalition of organizations committed to transparency and open government at the federal and particularly at the state level. A few colleagues and myself, we run FOIAadvisor.com, which is a free public resource on FOIA. And finally, I'm in my 4th year now as president of the American Society of Access Professionals, which in large part is committed to doing trainings for federal, but also state and local employees who work on Privacy Act and FOI laws. So when Dr. Shogan gave her introduction, she mentioned the 1974 amendments, and I'm excited that this term coincides with the 50th anniversary of those amendments. The veto override passed in November, 50 years ago this year. And I think as Margaret had mentioned, and Frank as well, we're at a time now, 50 years, the 74 amendments, in my mind, really made FOIA what it is today, and transformed the act as originally passed. And this is a good opportunity for us to do a little retrospective analysis of how things have gone and where things need to go, especially in a world that's very different from 1974. So I'm particularly excited that statutory reform is one of the 3 buckets that you mentioned, Alina, and whether it's dealing with new types of electronic records or fees or how litigation works or how the foreseeable harm standard and the statutory exemptions are working, or whether we need to get rid of deliberative process privilege. There's lots of issues for us to explore, and I'm thrilled to be able to be part of that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Richard, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Alina. I'm Rick Peltz-Steele. I'm a professor at University of Massachusetts Law School. I've been working on FOIA matters for a long, long time. It was actually an impetus for me to move from journalism to law some 30 years ago, was frustrations and efficacy of FOIA, both in reporting at state level, police especially, and a little bit of federal with tax records. And I've been an academic now going on 30 years, and FOIA has always been close to my heart in that regard, both transparency generally, FOIA federal and state levels, teaching courses in the subject on and off over the years, doing research on and off. And it's a great honor to be here as part of this group to be able to have some input. In terms of priorities, I think we've heard a lot of the recurring themes, and I'll say, like Deborah did, that I'm going to just jump on some of those, because when I look back at the reports from previous years, it seems pretty clear that making technology a good instead of an evil is key, that implementation is key. As an outsider, someone new here, it strikes me that this group has really amassed a fantastic volume of recommendations over the years, and it really is important to start turning to what has their impact been. If I got a turn on Frank's magic lamp, I would be interested in knowing more about exploring the efficacy of FOIA relative to private sector and private sector information that comes into government hands, especially in this age of both corporate power and private person's information being very sensitive. And I don't know, that's not to prejudge and say that there's any issue or problem, but I know that that's a big issue at the state level. And borrowing from Frank's comments, I'd say that most of my work has been at the state level, and I think one of the beautiful things that we ought not lose sight of at the federal level is that we have the advantage of a 50-state laboratory to explore a lot of ideas about transparency and accountability. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. On the phone, I believe we have Melissa Pickworth. Melissa, are you on?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Good morning.
Oh, great. Good morning. Thank you for having me. I am I'm Melissa Pickworth, Disclosure Policy Branch Chief in FDA's Office of Regulatory Affairs. And I've been doing FOIA work here for about 15 years. I supervise a branch of disclosure, GIS's Government Information Specialists, and as well as work in the policy area for FDA. My hopes, like some of the other committee members have mentioned, one of my wish list items is to find a workable path forward on unduly burdensome requests. And I think also I'd like to do some work in the area of FOIA funds.
Thank you, Melissa. Bobby, over to you.
Thank you, Lena. Thank you. Yeah. Good morning, everyone, and I am thrilled to be here with many new and familiar faces, and many familiar faces that I've only seen virtually for a while. My name is Bobby Talibian. I'm the Director of the Office of Information Policy, OIP, at the Department of Justice. And OIP is responsible for encouraging government-wide compliance with the FOIA and overseeing FOIA through the reporting responsibilities. So we do that in a number of different ways, through our guidance, training, resources we develop, such as the DOJ Guide to the FOIA, and providing agency counsel. And so really enjoyed working with past committees and on past committees, and not just furthering furthering the work of our office, but also other areas of FOIA as well. I think one of the strengths of this committee is the different perspectives that we get from different agency folks and non-agency folks. And so I look forward to building on the past successes by bringing these new perspectives to the table. I think I share the interest in all the themes that were discussed today. I think they all can lead to this, but I'm very hopeful that we can find new and innovative and recommendations that help us meet agencies able to meet the capacity, raise the capacity of being able to meet the demand of FOIA. With last year receiving over 1 million requests, processing over 1 million requests for the first time ever, and just based off of what I'm seeing at our Department of Justice, I think we're probably going to break those numbers again. So we want to be able to stay ahead of that demand. So thank you. We look forward to working with the committee.
Thanks, Bobby. Sarah, over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Weichsel. I am a historian, and I'm currently the Director of Research and Publications at the American Historical Association, which was founded as a nonprofit organization in 1884 and then chartered by Congress for the promotion of historical studies in the United States and the preservation of the historical record in general. So I am really looking forward to being here and to contributing perspectives from historians and from history organizations. Historians are part of the requester community, of course, and we rely upon access to archival sources for our work. So in thinking ahead to some of the things that we might accomplish as the committee, I share in other colleagues' hope that we can consider some of the technological advances that could apply to FOIA and to identify some really workable solutions on all sides for decreasing the processing time. Look forward to working with you all.
Thanks, Sarah. Last but not least, Nick.
Good morning. My name is Nicholas Wittenberg. I am a corporate counsel and senior advisor for legal technology and innovation at our media, where we enjoy serving the federal family in a number of areas, including FOIA. Previously, I was at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, where I was detailed there for 2 years. For my home agency, the United States Environmental Protection Agency. I also had the pleasure of serving on the Chief FOIA Officer Council Technology Committee, where I chaired our AI working group. And like Ryan said, I also had the pleasure of serving on ASAP, a wonderful organization that helps training and discussion in the FOIA space. Additionally, I'm a proud graduate of undergrad and law school at the University of Toledo. Future, I would love to continue the work I've done in artificial intelligence so that our federal family can be more efficient, accurate, as well as not committing the FOIA sin of copies of information moving down Pennsylvania Avenue. So really excited to make it more efficient and accurate for our federal family in this space.
Okay, thank you very much. And thanks all of you for introducing yourselves. We're actually running a little ahead of schedule, which is fine by me. I just want to remind everyone, meeting materials are available on the committee's webpage, and we will make video and transcript available on the webpage as soon as possible. And information about all of our committee members, including members' biographies, and all of our committee documents are going to be available on the FOIA Advisory Committee webpage on the OGIS website. So, although we're running ahead of schedule, I'm going to invite Kirsten Mitchell, our designated federal officer, to go up to the lectern and tutor us on FOIA Advisory Committee responsibilities, bylaws, and procedures.
Thank you, Alina. Next slide, please. Next slide. So I apologize to you all here who, I'm behind you, but I'm speaking to all of you and all of you. Welcome, everyone, committee members, those of you watching here in McGowan Theater, and those of you watching on YouTube. I'm Kirsten Mitchell, the committee's designated federal officer, and in addition to that role, I lead compliance efforts at the Office of Government Information Services, or OGIS. My OGIS colleagues, Dan Levinson and Kimberly Reed, are alternate designated federal officers and step in when I am unable to fulfill the duties of DFO. And Dan is right here in the front row of McGowan, so I just want to send an extra shout out to him. I also want to recognize Rana Kandakar in the Office of General Counsel here at the National Archives, as well as Jamie Atkinson and the National Archives AV team. Thank you for all you do. I'm thrilled that the committee comprises such esteemed FOIA experts from across the ideological spectrum. I'm going to very briefly, and I promise I'll be brief, go through some governance matters and explain a little bit about my role and yours. And fear not, while the agenda lists my presentation lasting 20 minutes, I plan to yield about half that time back to the committee. So first up, the committee operates under 3 laws. The Federal Advisory Committee Act, which you will hear referred to as FACA, the Federal Freedom of Information Act, of course, or FOIA, and the Government in Sunshine Act. FACA governs the operation of federal advisory committees across the government, including the 4 here at the National Archives. In addition to this advisory committee, the FOIA Advisory Committee, the others are the Records of Congress Advisory Committee, the National Industrial Security Program Policy Advisory Committee, and the State, Local, Tribal, and Public Sector Policy Advisory Committee. Advisory committees have played an important role in shaping programs and policies of the federal government since the early days of our republic. And I know some of you have heard this before, but I'm going to repeat it. President George Washington sought the advice of such a committee, a federal advisory committee, during the Whiskey Rebellion of 1794. So you always get a dose of history when you come to the National Archives. FACA, which Congress passed in 1972, mandates how these committees operate. FACA requires the committee to operate transparently and openly, 2 qualities that are central to the work we do here at the National Archives. So records of the committee are posted on OGIS's website, as Alina referenced. Committee meetings, such as this, are public, whether they are in person or virtual. We invite public comment. In short, we shine a light on the operations of the committee. Next slide, please. So what does a DFO do? A DFO is an administrative officer ensuring that the rules laid out in the Federal Advisory Committee Act and the committee's bylaws are followed. This slide lists some of the DFO's duties, the first 4 required by FACA. I'd like to say that the job entails herding cats. I won't read those first 4 requirements, but the 5th point on the slide is not in FACA, but I consider it to be among the most important. Be a resource. Committee members, as some of you have already noted, you join this committee with well-trodden ground. Previous committees have passed 67 recommendations. Your work on the subcommittees will require knowing what previous committees have studied and recommended, and that's where your DFO is a resource. I am always happy to keep you informed and to connect you to resources, whether it's FOIA professionals at a particular agency that have experience with a specific topic, records management experts here at the National Archives, or committee alumni who have expertise on a particular topic. Slide 10, or next slide, please. Committee members, you all have some particular responsibilities too. Again, I won't read the slide, but I do want you to encourage all of you to please submit agenda ideas. We have had some terrific speakers who have shared their research and work with the committee. In fact, some of the members of this terms committee have presented to prior terms. And I'm looking at you, Ryan Mulvey, Rick Peltz-Steele, and Margaret Quokka. Next slide. So as Alina noted, we hope that subcommittees can be formed by the end of the committee's Friday meeting, which, like this one, will start at 10 a.m. but will be virtual. Committee members, please consider volunteering to co-chair and or join a subcommittee as that emerges. Next slide. Finally, I'd like to briefly address members of the public, those of you here in McGowan Theater and those of you watching on the National Archives YouTube channel. Please get involved. How can you do that? Well, attend the committee's meetings, which, as I've mentioned, are open to the public. Submit written public comments at any time. You can go to the FOIA Advisory Committee page on the OGIS website to learn more about that. but we welcome public comments at any time. And we have already received some public comments that are posted on our website and that I shared with the committee late last week. Speak during public comments period that we have at the end of each meeting. Again, as Alina mentioned, today only the folks here in McGowan Theater will be allowed to make public comments, but fear not, we have another meeting on Friday, and anyone who registers will be given 3 minutes to speak. So FOIA works best with everyone working together, agencies and requesters, and the FOIA Advisory Committee works best when there is hearty public engagement. One last point, Alina and I really look forward to working with you all this term, and I promise we will have a lot of fun together. And with that, I turn it back over to you, Alina, unless there are any questions.
Yeah, any questions from committee members for Kirsten? No. Okay, it's all crystal clear. Thank you, Kirsten. Okay, I think we are running ahead on our agenda, which is fine by me. I think it's fine by everyone else too. I just want to look around and make sure no one else has any thoughts or questions before we take a break. Are you ready for a break? Yeah, there are a lot of bright lights up here on McGowan Theater stage, so let me just go over a couple of quick things before we take a short break. A reminder, you may wish to purchase food or drink from the Charters Cafe located on this level. As a reminder, no food or drink allowed back in the theater. There are restrooms directly outside the theater and another set by the Charters Cafe. Enjoy your break, please, and please be back. It is 10:47. If we could get everyone back here on stage at 11:02 a.m., that would be great. And with that, I just want to remind everyone that the mics are going to be turned off during our break, but just to be extra safe, try to avoid side conversations near the mics. Encourage committee members to go in the green room or go upstairs. So with that, let's take a 15-minute break. Thank you. Can you guys hear me? Ah, now I can hear myself. Much better. I'm going to try that again. Jason and Melissa, are you back with us on the phone?
Yes.
Hi, Melissa. Great to hear your voice. Jason?
Alina, can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Thank you. I just wanted to double check. I'm checking with our AV folks. Are we ready to go back on live?
And Alina, as I said,
Welcome back from break. Hope everyone had a good break. And welcome back to the FOIA Advisory Committee's inaugural term, sixth term, I should say, of the FOIA Advisory Committee 2024-26. It's so hard to say 26. We're a little ahead of schedule, but that's totally fine. We are at the point where we're going to turn to the agenda item of getting the most out of your time on the committee and passing the baton. We kind of merge them together and getting ideas from the prior two terms. And I have invited Jason Barron and Dave Collier and Bobby Talibian. Margaret, we didn't mean to leave you out, but we just figured, you know, you need a break. So we'll call on you later. Don't worry. There will be like opportunity for you to comment. Dave, could I turn to you first and share some thoughts with us about getting the most out of your committee time and also passing the baton?
Okay, well, thank you, Alina, and I welcome a conversation too with Jason and Bobby, but and these are my own opinions, so they may be completely contrary to what anyone else thinks, including you, Alina.
That's totally
fine. So take that into consideration. One, you know, I think it's smart not to overextend. I think my first term I was on all subcommittees, and I learned that's not a good thing. So I think focus is good, and with subcommittees having liaisons and the ability to communicate with one another, and/or working groups, you know, folks can get involved in working groups, which can be very efficient. One thing that came up in a term, I think, when we don't necessarily have to wait until the last meeting in 2 years to propose everything or vote on everything. And, you know, that's with my experience this last term where, you know, I completely botched it. We were rushing at the end. And so I think moving on things early and even getting recommendations out the first year is a smart way to think about it. It's not like we have to wait and approve it all at the end, which can be frantic. And then when we are approving things, I do recommend, it's not in the bylaws, but I like first readings. So I don't, you know, as a committee member, I don't think any of us would want to be surprised at a meeting like, oh, here's a proposal, all those in favor, without having read it, without having discussed it, and maybe, you know, throw it in a committee meeting and discuss it and then bring it back after people have had time to think about it and discuss. So I think it's not in the bylaws, but maybe it should be down the road. It just makes good sense. Let's see. I think, and this is my personal opinion, and others may disagree, but I think it's good to think about who our audience is. You know, who are we engaging with? Who are we writing for? A show of hands, how many people here have a JD? Raise your hand. Okay, so I respect lawyers. My dad's one. And I'll refrain from lawyer jokes. But, you know, there's a bunch of folks here who see the world from that lens, and I think it's important. Oh, and how many are PhD eggheads? Raise your hand. Okay, same thing, right? So I think it's important that we think about, well, who can we communicate with, and particularly some of these changes. A lot of requesters don't have PhDs or law degrees. I don't know if there are a lot of FOIA officers out there. Maybe they all have law degrees or whatnot, but I think it's good to think about the public at large, and as we write and we speak. And then the two last things. One, okay to disagree. So I always wanted to hear more from FOIA officers. And I always wondered, were their bosses telling them, don't say anything, especially in public, or whatever? Maybe not. And Margaret, I brought this up last night with her, and she's like, well, in my term, they were pretty, they said what they thought. So I do encourage, if you're part of the government, I don't think the requester community has that problem. But I think sometimes, reticent to speak up sometimes. And it's okay to disagree. We can do that. In fact, it's okay to vote no. Feels like sometimes a pressure that things are unanimously approved, and it doesn't have to be. And it's okay to have recommendations rejected. I authored this sole recommendation that was rejected by the archivist, and I'm proud of it. So, we should feel like we can express different ideas and come up with solutions that maybe even outside the box and not everybody agrees with, I think. And lastly, my thought is, I think it's useful to really do our homework out of the gate. Skim not only the past reports from the past terms, but the implementation report that a lot of folks worked on last term that synthesized all 51 previous recommendations. And then also skim the subcommittee reports and the working group reports. I know it's a lot, but it's good reading while you're watching something on Netflix or something. Just skim the stuff, and I think you'll learn a lot, because there's been so much research and work done by all these people previous, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel sometimes. So those are just some of my thoughts, and hopefully Bobby and Jason, I'm sure Jason will have some really good ideas too.
That's great. Thank you, David. Bobby, over to you.
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to share my thoughts. So I just kind of thought about it for a little bit from my perspective of the prior terms and some key takeaways I took that to pass on to help us going forward. I think it's really important to keep an open mind. We bring, again, different perspectives, and what I really enjoyed and I thought was really successful in the past committees is when we learn from each other and then develop recommendations or recommended initiatives that are really actionable and can really achieve something because they have taken into account all the different perspectives that we are engaging in this important law. And the other thing is, I think it's really helpful and important to leverage all the available resources that we have. And in the past, I feel, especially the past committee did that with reviewing annual reports, chief FOIA officer reports, information that's already readily available, working and conversating with the Chief FOIA Officer Council, which Alina and I co-chair, in the work that they're doing, and a number of initiatives that actually came out of recommendations from prior committees, as well as David mentioned, looking at the past reports and recommendations of the past committees, as well as introducing or talking to other agency representatives that are not here, as well as public stakeholders, to be able to learn from them in furthering our work. With keeping with an open mind, I think recommend, and this theme I think is in the past report, the past committee report as well. I think recommendations are good when we can come up with really good recommendations, but that doesn't define the success of the committee, and we can look to other different ways. And I think observations, education, there's all of these different things that might be of more help for this term of the committee that we could explore. But when we do form recommendations, I think the most successful ones have been, and I'll disagree somewhat with David, I do think it's important that we be comfortable to disagree and agree and disagree and have really fruitful, robust discussions. But I think the best recommendations, from my point, the ones that are most actionable, have been the ones where the majority have been able to come to a consensus of what is like a reasonable recommendation to meet the challenge that we're trying to solve. With that, I think the last committee did a really good job of this, when we do have recommendations, making sure that they're very well justified and explained. I think be very specific and develop specific and actionable recommendations, as well as thinking about, when we do develop any recommendations, certain milestones maybe that would be helpful for consideration to meet the recommendation timelines, reasonable timelines. I guess one of the last observations I had, and I think everyone here has had, is that the majority of the committee's work is done through the subcommittees. And so I agree completely with Dave. I think you should overextend yourself, because when you commit to a subcommittee, it's really important that you're very active, because you're representing a perspective. And if you're not active, then that's something that's not in the conversation anymore and not going to lead to a helpful recommendation, I think, because I think balanced perspective in resulting in participation is key to good recommendations. And then finally, I think it's a good point that David made, is that we should consider what even the committees, even though don't overextend yourself, but the subcommittees should consider what the other subcommittees are doing, so that we're not doing overlap, as well as making sure that we're not overlapping with what the Chief Forester Council is working on. So those were my thoughts, and then just FOIA and fun are both start with F, so let's just have fun.
Okay, thank you very much. I forgot to mention Dave Collier served on the 2020 to 22 term and the 22 to 24 term, and Bobby has been on the committee since 2020 by virtue of his position as the director of OIP. So Jason, over to you on the phone. We'd love to hear from you.
Alina, can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Loud and clear.
Great. So I'm so sorry that I can't be there with everyone. I do want to thank Alina for giving me the opportunity to make some remarks here. And I want to make some broader remarks about the issues that this committee needs to acknowledge, the sort of the reality in the space. And then I will turn to remarks about how the committee should approach its work this term, or at least my suggestion. Can I just preface that I passed on the opportunity to say anything further about my own FOIA background? I didn't want to be a disembodied voice twice. So I have been in this space for a long time, 33 years in government at DOJ and NARA. I was lead counsel on the Armstrong versus Executive Office of the President case from 1992 on. I was lead counsel and lead agency counsel on a number of FOIA lawsuits. I'm very proud of the fact that I was an evangelist standing up to get rid of print to paper in government and to urge NARA to adopt a capstone policy for email. I also played a role in the Managing Government Records Directive, where I recommended a 2019 deadline for the transition to electronic record keeping, which was then extended twice to June 2024. So we have now passed that deadline, and every agency is under a mandate to manage their records electronically. So with that said, I want to direct first a couple of comments to the government reps on the committee. I have nothing but the highest admiration and praise for those of you who are serving on the committee, who represent agencies. It was the highest honor and privilege of my life to stand up in court saying that I represent the United States. But here's the thing, as a government rep, I don't believe you should be reticent in this public forum to acknowledge obvious things about the FOIA, as it works or it doesn't work, and how it should work through the executive branch. I know that agency representatives on this committee are all stellar public servants, but we have to acknowledge the reality that not all FOIA shops are implementing cutting-edge practices involving technology or dealing with their backlogs. In fact, in 2012, the year before I left government service, there were a reported 71,000 FOIA backlog cases, but in 2012, 10 years later, that number had grown to 206,000. It is not unusual for a DOJ lawyer in the office I used to be in federal programs, or the U.S. Attorney's Office, to file in court a declaration from an agency saying that it will take many years, maybe even more than a decade, to complete work on a particular large volume request. The representatives on this committee from the public interest community know this, and from academia, and they can point out the enormous frustration that delays coupled with inadequate explanations from agencies cause, leading, among other things, to litigation when it is even feasible for the requester to do so. I, for one, am still waiting over 2 years for half of the 2 dozen or so FOIA requests that I filed with different agencies to be responded to. So there's another reality as well, the volume of electronic records, and I'm glad to hear, Alina, that your big basket includes volume as one of the issues. It's beyond anything that can be handled by traditional methods. No one in their right mind would consider it reasonable to conduct human review of millions of agency records. But with keyword searching, huge volumes of hits are routinely retrieved, and further review for the purpose of responsiveness and withholding exempt material is largely still done manually, without any assistance by more sophisticated technology. FOIA backlogs will only increase if these methods from the past continue. And we can say something more about this and do something more about this, especially when dealing with your own agency's capstone repositories of emails. And I would ask every member from the government on this committee to find out what the number of emails are in your own agency's capstone repository. I can guarantee that there are tens or hundreds of millions of email records and attachments in larger cabinet departments and agencies. But there are solutions involving the use of state-of-the-art AI and machine learning methods that urgently need to be implemented in line with past recommendations. And I've devoted the last few years as an academic to research in AI and FOIA, which I'm happy to talk about. So now let me turn to some thoughts on how the members of this committee might best proceed, given what past committees have recommended formally and informally. And I agree with what David and Bobby have said. We all should know that the committee has crafted a total of 67 formal recommendations in past terms. The terrific OGIS dashboard has cataloged these, many of which can truly be said to have been completed through the fine work of the staffs of OGIS and OIP. But let me put a marker down here, and David knows that I was on my soapbox all last term about this. We have to be emphatically clear, as we were in the implementation subcommittee report from last term, that many of the successes by OGIS and OIP in completing guidance to be sent to agencies haven't translated into the agencies themselves taking steps to implement that guidance in a meaningful way. The implementation subcommittee's report needs to be carefully read as it lays, not skimmed, but really read, as it lays out a roadmap for what still is needed, even with respect to, quote, completed, unquote, recommendations. As for recommendations that are pending from last term or otherwise in progress, those too are worthy candidates for concrete actions on the part of all actors, not just OGIS and OIP, which are terrific, but all agencies that are within scope of the recommendations. Now, I said there were both formal and informal recommendations made in the past. By informal, what I would point everyone here to are the last sections, variously termed additional or final remarks and observations in the modernization subcommittee's report, the implementation subcommittee's report, and the final report of the FOIA Advisory Committee from last term. Of highest importance, last term's committee was of the view, and David and Bobby have reiterated this, that in this next term we should all be, quote, thinking outside the recommendations box. It was noted in the report that at the present rate, by 2030, this committee will be expected to have made over 100 recommendations, and Liz alluded to the next decade, 50 years in the future. I hesitate to wonder how many recommendations would be then. In any event, it makes no sense to continue to churn out recommendations if agencies lack awareness of their existence or are aware but routinely fail to implement or comply with recommendations for whatever reason, including due to resignation that nothing can be done to change the status quo without more resources from Congress or from their heads of agencies. So I cannot urge enough everyone on the committee taking a look at the Modernization Subcommittee report at pages 25 to 31, the Implementation Subcommittee report at pages 10 to 12, and pages 35 to 37 of the final report from last term. In those passages, you will find a broad discussion of such matters as the following: acknowledging the need for this committee to step up in its public engagement practices with the FOIA community and civic society, including giving public notice and a chance to comment on select draft recommendations. Also, the desirability of having OGIS, the archivist, and DOJ OIP engage with the White House and OMB to raise the visibility of FOIA and this committee's past recommendations. Another thought in those passages was greater collaboration with the Chief FOIA Officers Council and its Technology Committee, and also ensuring that this committee keep in mind what this and the next administration is doing with respect to the Open Government Partnership. I also highly recommend reading Appendix E to the Implementation Subcommittee's report from last term, which describes in detail what was learned from interviews conducted with FOIA officials in a variety of agencies. They had much to recommend themselves about how this committee could heighten its visibility, make a greater impact, and sharpen the quality of its recommendations. Making recommendations is not easy, but it is far easier to dream up recommendations than actually figuring out how this committee can make a difference in ensuring that all past and present recommendations are known throughout the executive branch and are meaningfully discussed by senior officials who can actually do something about them. We need to take stock in the first meetings, the first months of this committee, how we can move the needle in making the impact of what our recommendations have said just a better job of doing that. As last term's report acknowledged, this committee is chartered as an advisory body under FACA. It is not an auditing agency or one that can itself directly provide guidance to the executive branch, but we can actively engage with OGIS and OIP through Alina and Bobby and their staffs to accomplish more than we ever have in taking a hard look at how we can improve the way agencies administer the FOIA. And we can do so now over the next few months without waiting until the end of this committee's 2-year term. And as an aside, I mean, we have to acknowledge the fact that there will be a new president and a new administration come January. And we should act as a catalyst in making early recommendations to whoever is in charge in thinking about government policy. So the final paragraph of last term's final report is, I believe, a good starting point for our further discussions, starting this Friday at our second public meeting and going forward. And I'll just quote a couple sentences and then I'll be done. The report says, quote, "For the past 5 terms, the members of successive FOIA advisory committees have endeavored to make a positive contribution in improving how agencies administer the FOIA. We trust and expect that in future terms, this committee's members will not consider themselves solely wedded to past ways of doing business. Instead, they should consider employing strategies and creative thinking to magnify the committee's voice to ensure that the mission of FOIA to increase government transparency and accountability is best accomplished through their efforts," close quote. It just takes some real creativity on the part of everyone here, with everyone on the committee actively participating with their ideas and suggestions, and I look forward to being part of this effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. That was very well put. I took a lot of notes. I'm sure everyone else did too. Dave, Bobby, anything you wanted to add based on Jason's comments? And everyone jotted down the homework assignments, right? Oh, no. Okay. Questions from the rest of the committee members? And I know we have a number of new committee members, so we will walk you through this. Don't worry. We're here to be here with you by your side. I welcome questions, comments, thoughts. And Margaret, not to call on you necessarily, but do you have any other comments or thoughts based on your experience on your term?
Sure. Not to call on me, but here you have. I really appreciate all the comments that were already offered about the experiences, which I think are both more recent and possibly more relevant than mine, which was a while ago and sort of in the earlier phases of this committee. So I'll add maybe just a comment that's sort of more of a reaction, not based on my service prior, but just on the comments that were offered, which is to add sort of one other aspect of sort of operationalizing our recommendations in a better way. We are not the only, certainly not the only FACA committee, but also only sort of body in government that is working collaboratively between government and non-governmental members to create recommendations for the improvement of the administrative state. And I've had the chance to work with ACUS, the Administrative Conference of the United States, which produces recommendations about improving agency administration across a wide variety of subjects. And one of the things that a recent project I was involved in there did was to actually create recommended proposed legislation on a topic. It was not a sort of FOIA reform writ large. It was sort of a narrow topic. But I just mentioned that example to say that while we're thinking about, I think, Jason's comments really highlighted all the ways in which on the administrative side, recommendations could be better operationalized. On the legislative side, if we're talking about that, I think we should be thinking about getting as specific as we can be and creating as useful as possible a product at the end of this term that could be sort of an off-the-shelf proposal of some variety when there is someone ready to take up that charge. And I think that's one way in which this expertise could be best harnessed. And then the last thing I was going to say, which actually is more about sort of my time on the committee and was referenced, I think, a bit both in Bobby and Dave's and Jason's comments, is that I found an enormously helpful the process of interviewing or at the very least sort of reaching out and getting sort of a variety of experiences from government agencies as sort of source material for recommendations. And so I would just for those of you who are serving for the first time, OJA's staff are very gracious in setting up contacts wherever it is you might want to get information from. So if you're really interested in the experience of the VA, or if you really want to know more about what's happening in a particular agency, even if there's someone not on the committee who represents that agency, there's always a way to get into contact with those places. And as we were studying particular topics, it was always very useful to sort of canvass a wide variety of experiences, and I learned an enormous amount that way and really feel grateful for the time that people offered. And so that is one way to approach, at the very least, topics where it might be beneficial to understand a variety of agency practices.
Thank you. Margaret, that was really helpful. Any other thoughts? Or yeah, Dave, go ahead, please.
Well, building on that, I think you make a really good, David Coulier from University of Florida. Got to get in that habit now. So, I think if the subcommittees also coordinate in their information gathering, that would help. I think last term, one subcommittee did a survey of FOIA officers, and then soon after, another subcommittee did a survey of FOIA officers. And so if we kind of coordinate efforts, that might relieve some burden on people. And so definitely a way of systematically coordinating would be good. And then the other thing is we might also want to coordinate with this new committee on something or other that GSA is about to start, open government partnership thing, which sounds great, and I'm really excited to see what they do. But it would be great if I don't know how we do it, but somehow coordinate the two committees as we're looking, at least informing each other what we're working on at minimum, so maybe we can learn from each other if we have topics we're both working on. So anyway.
Yeah, they're learning from us, actually. We've been in touch with them and trying to help them. Their first meeting is October 23rd. I think that sounds right. And I hope that's public. Just share some private information. No, their first meeting is next month. So yes, we really look forward to working with them cooperatively and learning from each other. And Kirsten and I certainly have been in touch with them to try to help them. It's their first FACA that they're running. in this space. So we definitely want to work with them. So great idea. Yeah, go ahead, Ryan, please.
Ryan Mulvey, AFPF. Sorry. I thought, Jason, you had made a point, and really I think Dave and Bobby had kind of suggested this too, about thinking outside the box when it came to recommendations. The Open Government Secretariat and its new advisory committee doing something with them is, I think, interesting. I mean, looking at the chart, this is more a question, I suppose, for Kirsten and Alina and Nara. Looking at the charter and the bylaws, I mean, the scope of what we are authorized, as it were, to do seems rather broad. I mean, everything is just, our deliverables are to make recommendations. Are there clear boundaries as to what you consider acceptable? Because I seem to recall that there was debate in the last term with respect to Congress and like whether recommendations could be made that were really directed more to Congress as opposed to the archivist do you see where I'm going? So I suppose we can get creative, but is there openness on the part of the archivist to allowing us to do things that haven't been done before? Or how far can we possibly experiment?
Great question. I haven't spoken to her directly about this, so I'm happy to explore this further. I mean, from the beginning, when I first took over as chair, I was struggling a little bit about the fact that the mandate of the committee is to actually make recommendations to the Archivist of the United States. And the Archivist, of course, has full jurisdiction over records management issues, but not FOIA writ large. She's not responsible for FOIA across the government. So we've been a little careful, if you will, in how we phrase the recommendations, but I don't want to discourage anyone from thinking outside the box and making creative recommendations. I think there's ways we could, work with whatever the committee comes up with. So is that a very good equivocal answer that I just gave you?
Yeah, Ryan, again. I guess it's kind of green light for us to do what we want, and then we'll get to not do what we want, but to propose what we want, and then, we can have the conversation.
Running amok.
I want to say, let's go have a meeting on the Hill and talk to legislators or something like that.
So the non-government members are certainly welcome to do that. Absolutely. But thank you for raising that. It's a really good point. And we'll continue having dialogue about it. Yeah, go ahead, please, Frank.
Frank Lamonti with CNN. Just Jason's remarks about having a new president coming really resonated with me, and I'm sorry, this may be not just outside the box, but this may be Hubble Space Telescope distance from the box. I apologize for this, but is there a mechanism, or could there be a mechanism, to synthesize the greatest hits out of the 67 past recommendations into something like a day one action agenda for a new administration of things that could be done without new appropriations or new legislation, but could be done by executive order? Because when you have 67 priorities, like, nothing is a priority, right? You sort of have to prioritize your priorities. And would it be possible to set, even if it's wholly aspirational, a 10 greatest hits agenda to say, these are the things that the consensus of this committee is both urgently need addressing and could be done with a proverbial stroke of a pen?
I have a response to that.
Yeah, please go ahead, Jason.
Jason Barron. So I think that's an excellent point. President Obama issued an executive order on day one about government transparency. My thoughts on this would be that it's certainly within our remit to come up with language for OMB to pass on to the new president to issue an executive order that highlights the importance of FOIA and points in a link to our final reports. So not to get the president in the weeds of this or OMB, but to put down a marker that FOIA is important and that we exist. And be happy to work with people on that.
I was looking also at Dave because the implementation subcommittee last term tried to generate thoughts from the subcommittee members about the 5 most important past recommendations, and how did that go?
Well, it wasn't easy. Dave Coulier, University of Florida. Yeah, it wasn't easy, and I'm sure this committee would probably come up with other priorities, but I think it's a really good idea, what Jason's saying and Frank. I mean, shoot, this is something we could turn around this fall and get in their hands, which, well, both campaigns. I think this is a great idea to get us moving quickly, and it's a great way for everybody to review and get up to speed quickly. It forces us to, so I love it.
All right, thanks. Yeah, Nick, go ahead.
Again with
Nick
Jason.
Nick
Oh, sorry. Nick Wittenberg with our media. But I think it's a great idea because I think obviously EOs have great, and I think we don't want to copy information, but I think the collaboration is great. But I think Alina and Bobby also testified, which really had some excellent information about there. So I think, moving that mission forward, that FOIA of the future aspirational hope could be reality on day one. I think that's a wonderful thing from government individuals to really look at and hash out in a subcommittee like this to really kind of move the needle forward. And it'd be really exciting just to see what's that training, technology, and those really things that agencies could value from a great group like this.
Oh, okay. Anyone else? Great discussion, thank you. Jason, any other thoughts?
No, I'll just say again, if everyone reads the sections of the reports in particular that I highlighted before Friday, I think we can have a meaningful discussion of the kind of informal or procedural recommendations rather than formal recommendations. How do we strategically do things in getting OGIS and OIP and other actors in government involved in what we have said substantively in other recommendations? So it's a kind of particular type of recommendation. It's one about process, not about substance.
Okay, thank you. Melissa, I know you're on the phone. Any thoughts about anything that we've said today? I just want to make sure we don't forget you.
No, I just, sorry, thanks for me. I just had a question, and it was kind of going off of what someone had mentioned earlier about proposals to the Hill, and I was just curious, if I know there's been discussion of some of the potential subcommittee jurisdictions that we want to set up, and if there were a legislation subcommittee, I mean, has it ever occurred that we have made draft legislation proposals in prior committee terms? I was just curious of knowing the answer to that.
Not language per se. I'm just thinking out loud. Kirsten, can you think of
This is
anything?
Kirsten Mitchell, the designated federal officer. The committee has not made specific recommendations with specific legislative language, but I know the past committees have made proposals for legislation, and OGIS has provided not so much specific language, but sort of fine-tuned it and said, well, I'm thinking of the 508 compliance, the intersection between 508 compliance and FOIA. And OGIS was able to provide to the Hill some options for how to make that intersection more streamlined, but we didn't make specific language recommendations.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the one of the duties that OGIS has, a statutory duty, is to provide an annual report to Congress and the President, and we have used that as a vehicle in the past to advance some of the committee's recommendations, and we're happy to continue that in the future, so that's also another opportunity. We usually put it out, we used to put it out around Sunshine Week, now we've pushed it back a little bit to May. Sunshine Week gets a little crazy. So May of 2025 is our next opportunity to speak to Congress and the President. So think about that also as an option.
I was also wondering, if there's ever been discussion of, if there was a widely agreed upon idea that, the agency representatives, that was wildly popular with the agency representatives, and there was a support internally if they could use the A19 process to submit those legislative proposals. If that's ever been considered, I guess, or raised as just an additional mechanism to kind of getting traction on an idea if it was very, very popular.
Melissa, I'm not sure I know what A19 refers to. Could you spell that out a little bit more?
That's a process that we use in agencies to submit legislative proposals up through OMB. That happens generally in the early springtime.
Okay.
And, they're soliciting input for legislative changes and that kind of for priorities within the White House. And then the White House would propose those initiatives on the Hill. There are other mechanisms as well, but that's the main one that we've used to propose disclosure-related proposals to the Hill.
I did not know that. Thank you for informing all of us. Yeah, Kirsten.
This is Kirsten Mitchell again, the DFO. I know that has been discussed at the subcommittee level, and I can't remember which term nor which subcommittees, but it has, that A19 thought has been discussed before, so you may wish to bring it up again, but it's not anything that the full committee has acted on.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. That's actually really helpful for us to think about.
Mary Ann Manheim, NIH. I guess one of the things I'm just thinking about, because I think it's good to look through these recommendations, because that's a lot. They keep going from thing to thing, and it seems like they worked on it last time and they were still back here. So, but the other thought is, one of the things while I've been sleeping, working on FOIA all these years, is this Chief FOIA Officer Council, and it seems like there's a lot of overlap. We only have so much time in the day. They're all working on technology. They're all working on these things. They might be looking at legislation for all I know. So I wonder how much we should be interacting with them so that way everyone's not doing their job twice. And maybe I don't understand enough, but I just want to throw that out there so we can maybe get that looked at early on, so he's not going to the same meeting twice, Bobby, in 1 week, right?
No, so I think it's really good. We, I think, did a good job of making sure the work was complementary and not overlapping. And so one of the positives of it is that both Alina and I co-chair the CFO Council. And so I think we'll make sure that the committee and the council are aware of what each other are doing. So for sure, we don't want to overlap where it's not necessary. I think that's a great point.
And if someone's on here and they're interested, they can just go to that meeting too, right?
Right.
They can just keep
our next
switching
meeting
Yes.
is
We're always
November
inviting-
7th.
There you go.
Early advertisement. But we have actually invited the Technology Committee and the COCACI, the Committee on Cross-Agency Collaboration and Innovation. I wish they would shorten that, but they have not, to come and speak to our committee. And so we're happy to do that again. If folks are interested, we're happy to set that up so you can hear about the work that they're doing. Otherwise, tune in on November 7th. We always give them an opportunity to brief the council and the public about all the work that they've been doing. Great point. Thank you. Anyone else? Great ideas. Thank you, everyone. Great discussion. Okay. So lots to think about. We have some homework to do between now and Friday. I'm going to go back and read it myself. Jason obviously will be quizzing us on Friday, so we better be ready. I've tried to plant the seed for volume and frequency of requests subcommittee, a FOIA statutory reform subcommittee, implementation of past committee recommendations. So think about that. And I, again, want to encourage members of the public to provide feedback to us on these topics and think about everything we've talked about today and provide us topics to think about between now and Friday. That would be very, very helpful. Again, our public forum is available on our website, archives.gov/OJIS/public-comments. And we'll continue this discussion on Friday. So make sure everyone does their homework. No pressure, Jason. Thank you. Okay, I think we're actually at the point where we're ready to turn to public comments. I just want to look at the committee members one more time to make sure no one else has any other questions or comments or thoughts before we turn to public comments. Next slide, please. So at this time, we're turning over to our public comments portion of our meeting. I want to invite any members in the audience who have public comments to please stand up at the microphones that are available on both sides of the theater. And we would love to hear from you. If you could please state your name and affiliation, that would be great. And we'll take it from there. So we have one speaker already ready to go.
My name is Adeline Wilcox. I'm a retired federal employee. I submit FOIA requests to the U.S. Census Bureau. Compared with the Trump administration, I find FOIA more frustrating under the Biden administration. Could be because a different attorney is assigned to my requests. A notable exception. Over the Labor Day weekend, Census FOIA cheerfully produced within days. Usually I hear nothing for weeks. Because I am a citizen journalist, I fall into the other requester category. I find Census FOIA's demands for amounts exceeding $400 unreasonable.
Thank you, Ms. Wilcox. Appreciate those comments. We have another speaker ready to go.
Hello, can you hear me?
A little louder.
Hello. Members of the Advisory Committee, my name is Michael Ravnitsky, and I truly appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. I've submitted some written comments, but I'd like to highlight a few key points from my recent article, The Right to Know, a FOIA Bill of Rights. With my experience in using the Freedom of Information Act and helping others, I've seen firsthand the unnecessary difficulties some requesters face. FOIA's core function is impaired. The statute, regulations, and guidance touch on some of these difficulties, but the issues persist. Requesters often face delays, overcharges, denials, and inconsistent communication. The FOIA Bill of Rights addresses these issues. These rights are real whether or not they are explicitly recognized in the law. Better acknowledgement would benefit everyone. A few examples. Requesters have the right to a final response letter that contains the case number, the subject description, and appeal rights. Many letters lack those basics. Requesters have the right to an estimated completion date and knowing their position in the processing queue upon request. Few agencies will provide this. Requests should be processed with a presumption of openness and the foreseeable harm test applied, but this often doesn't occur. Requesters should be able to ask for an electronic search of email without inappropriate constraints. Instead, agencies needlessly object to email searches. I should say some agencies object to email searches and often demand impossible information from the requester, such as specific email subject lines or dates and times of specific emails before they will proceed with the search. Requesters have the right to records that are not locked or encumbered by file restrictions unless a legitimate reason exists. They should also receive records scanned with reasonable care. However, it is common for requesters to receive records that are locked or restricted or poorly scanned or in unusable formats. Referred or remanded requests should be processed based on the original submittal date to avoid unfair years or decades-long delays. Finally, requesters should be given a good faith fee categorization and not just defaulted to the commercial requester category. Agencies should ask the requester for clarification if they object to the requester's self-described category. Requesters in a non-commercial fee category should not be charged for review fees. This happens a lot. And requesters should receive a complete and detailed fee breakdown of applicable fees upon request. These things all happen. Accommodating these rights would benefit agencies and requesters by reducing time-consuming appeals and litigation, saving time and resources. While statutory improvements would be helpful and welcome, my primary goal is for this committee to discuss the FOIA Bill of Rights and to issue recommendations. I ask the committee to consider these principles and explore ways to integrate them into existing FOIA regulations and practices. Such recommendations can encourage DOJ and OJIS to provide formal direction on these areas, and this may lead to improvements in DOJ's sample FOIA regulation template. Clear guidance on these rights would improve problem areas, promoting a more efficient and less adversarial FOIA process. Adopting these FOIA Bill of Rights principles will enhance transparency, fairness, and efficiency, reducing appeals and litigation. FOIA is essential to our system of government democracy. It supports the crucial work of journalists and empowers citizens to hold their government accountable. I urge the committee to consider the FOIA Bill of Rights to improve the experience for all FOIA requesters. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And the FOIA Bill of Rights has been posted on the OJIS website, so it's available for all the committee members to review and read. Thank you.
Hi, this is Kirsten Mitchell, the designated federal officer. I just wanted to note, Michael, your comments, you noted that final letters should include case numbers, subject description, and appeal rights. And one of the recommendations that came last term was a model determination letter that is, I can't remember the number, which recommendation number it is, but it is posted on the OJIS website. And I know Dave worked on that, and Bobby, and Jason, so that is out there. Just wanted to point that out.
Okay. Any comments from the committee based on the public comments we've heard? Okay, thank you. That was very helpful feedback. For those of you who are not here with us today in McGowan Theater, there will be another opportunity to make oral public comments at our Friday meeting. You have to register on our Eventbrite link, which is on our website, no later than 11:59 p.m. on Wednesday. So that way we can get you the Eventbrite information, the WebEx information for that meeting. So I'm going to just ask committee members any other parting thoughts. Otherwise, we're going to end our meeting a little bit early, and I'm happy to give you an hour back of your time. Any comments, questions? Okay. Just want to thank everyone for being here today. Jason and Melissa, thank you for participating on the phone. I want to invite everyone to visit our website, social media, for more information about how our committee is moving forward, our activities, and how you can participate. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope everyone and their families remain safe, healthy, and resilient. Just a reminder again, we're going to meet Friday, September 13th, starting at 10 a.m. Online. I want to encourage and invite all of our committee members to please sign in at 9:30 to make sure that there are no technical problems and we can work out any technical issues at that time. If there are no questions or comments, I think we're ready to adjourn. So we stand adjourned. Thank you.